Hearthstone's new expansion, The Great Dark Beyond, is finally here. So in this video, I prepared 11 brand new decks, one for each class, ready for you to use on day one. So without further ado, let's hop into the first deck. Kicking things off, we got Asteroid Shaman. This one centers all around the new asteroid cards, which when played, shuffle these little asteroids into your deck that when drawn, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. So we have the Moonstone Mauler, which is a 2-mana 2/2 elemental that shuffles 3 asteroids into your deck. We have the Ultraviolet Breaker, which does 3 damage to an enemy and shuffles 3 asteroids into your deck. We have the Meteor Storm, which does 5 damage to all minions and shuffles 5 asteroids. And the Bull-Eyed Behemoth, which has a Spell Burst to shuffle 3 asteroids, as well as a Battle Cry to permanently upgrade the damage of your asteroids this game by 1. And this Bull-Eyed Behemoth gets especially nutty if we can combine it with the Shutter Block, which triples up the next Battle Cry. And once we upgrade our asteroids and shuffle a bunch into our deck, we can help draw them out of our deck with the new Ethereal Oracle, which is a 3-mana 2/3 with a spell damage +1, which also increases the spell damage on your asteroids when you draw them, and a Spell Burst to draw 2 spells. And the spells that you draw can be the asteroid spells in your deck. And because the asteroids draw when they're cast, they can draw even more asteroids, and you can start some pretty crazy asteroid chains. And then we also have a Gaslight Gatekeeper in here, which shuffles our hand into our deck and draws that many cards. And because we're drawing a lot of cards, that helps discount the Ceaseless Expanse, which is a 100 mana card that gets discounted for every card that's destroyed, played, or drawn. And when you play it, it destroys all minions on the field except for itself. And this is perfect to set up some big combo turns with your asteroids, so you can clear the board first and then draw a bunch of asteroids so they all go face. And then our last really fun new wombo combo card that we're running in here is the Farseer Nubundo, which is a 5-mana 6/4 with a Death Rattle to open a location that stores the next spell that you play with 2 charges. So if you play a Meteor Storm right after this, you can store 2 more Meteor Storms, and that's a lot of board clears and a lot of asteroids. Yeah, this deck is one of my favorite decks that I'm looking forward to, and I actually got to play this for the Early Access Tavern Brawl and Early Access Theory Crafting event, and it performed really well in both. And I already made a video on that gameplay if you want to go check that out as well. Next up, we got Death Knight with the Starship Death Knight. So the Starship pieces that Death Knight got is the Guiding Figure, which has a Spell Burst to trigger a friendly minion's Death Rattle, as well as Soulbound Spire, which has a Death Rattle to summon a minion equal to this minion's attack, as well as the neutral Starship pieces like the Dimensional Core and the Arcanite Defense Crystal. And a lot of our Starship stuff is very Death Rattle themed, so we get to do some really cool stuff with that, like give our Starship pieces Reborn with the Brittlebone Buccaneer or a Mosh Pit. And not only does that work really well with the Death Rattles, so we get the Death Rattle to trigger again, we also get another Starship piece to add to the big Starship, because a lot of these pieces don't do a whole lot by themselves, but when you launch a huge Starship and trigger the Death Rattle of the Soulbound Spire, you get to summon minions up to 10 mana, and that gets pretty crazy, especially if you can combine that with the Spell Burst of the Guiding Figure, or activate that Death Rattle twice with the Yelling Yodeler, or launch it with the Exodar, where when you play the Exodar, you get to launch one of your Starships and also choose one of 3 options, where you get to gain double its health and armor, or deal its attack damage split up between all enemies, or get its Starship pieces back. And as we're building our Starship, we got another really good removal tool, and that's the Suffocate, where for 4 mana, you get to destroy an enemy minion, and if you're building a Starship, you get to kill the minion next to it. So yeah, this deck can make some pretty sticky boards and some pretty chunky minions too. Our third deck up is going to be a returning archetype, and that's going to be Libram Paladin. So this deck all focuses around the new Libram spells, which is the Libram of Clarity to draw a couple minions, the Libram of Divinity to buff a minion by +3/+3, and Libram of Faith to summon 3 3/3s with Divine Shield. And they each get a bonus effect if they're discounted to 0 mana. And we can discount them with the Interstellar Star Slicer, which is a 3-mana 2/3 weapon with a Battle Cry and Death Rattle to discount your Librams for the rest of the game by 1, as well as the Interstellar Wayfarer, which is a 4-mana 4/2 Divine Shield, which also discounts your Librams by 1 for the rest of the game. And we also have the new Interstellar Researcher to draw our Librams, and it's a 2-mana 2/2 with a Battle Cry and Spell Burst to draw a Libram. And then once we discount our Librams down to 2 mana or less, we can combine them with the Sun Sapper Lanessa, where whenever you play a spell that costs 2 or less, you get to double its effect. And then a couple of other really cool fun cards that we're running the new Yrel Beacon of Hope, which has a Death Rattle to give you 3 of the old Librams, and that's Libram of Wisdom, Libram of Justice, and Libram of Hope. And then we also have the new Lumia, which is a 6-mana 9/9 with Lifesteal. Whenever a hero takes damage, they become immune for the rest of the turn. So it basically has Taunt, because if they want to damage your face, they got to get through this first. I also got to play this deck for the Early Access Theory Crafting event, and I actually went undefeated with this final version right here, and it felt really good. And it just has so much value with those Librams. So watch out for this deck, because Librams are back. Coming in at number 4 on our list is going to be Hunter with the Starship Hunter. So Hunter's Starship pieces are going to be Biopod, which has a death rattle to do its attack damage to a random enemy, as well as Specimen Claw, which is a 3-mana 2/6 that attacks enemy minions when they're played. And of course, we're running the neutral Starship pieces, the Dimensional Core, and the Arcanite Defense Crystal. And the cool thing about this Starship is as your Starship pieces keep dying and as you keep beefing it up, once you launch it, it's going to have a ton of attack for the Biopod death rattle, and it might even have 2 Biopod death rattles on there, and then you can activate them with your Yelling Yodeler for a ton of burst damage. We're also running a really cool Discover package in here too. Like we're running the new Exarch Nael, which gives you a new hero power that for 1 mana, you can discover a card from your deck. And we can use that with the new Brangari Scout, where whenever you discover a card, you get a copy of it. So that's great to maybe get more copies of Starship pieces. And as we're discovering cards, it discounts our Alien Encounters, which is a 5-mana spell that summons 2 2/5 taunts, and it gets cheaper for every time we've discovered. And then we also have the Discover weapon, the Parallax Cannon, which is a 3-mana 2/3 weapon that gets +2 attack if you've discovered this turn, and also has a spell burst where you get immune for a turn too. So not only do we get to find everything that we need with this deck, thanks to all the discovers, but we also get to push a ton of damage too. This next deck is a really cool one, or should I say really hot. It's Fire Elemental Mage. So we have a lot of really sweet new cards that make fire spells and elementals the perfect synergy now. We have the Blazing Accretion, which draws 3 cards. Any that are not fire spells or elementals get discarded. So naturally, we want to pretty much run only elementals and fire spells in this deck to make sure that we're always drawing 3 cards from this. And we also have the Spontaneous Combustion, which deals 4 damage to a random enemy for 2 mana, or if you played an elemental last turn, you can target the enemy. And then we also have another damaging spell, the Solar Flare, which does 2 damage to all enemies for 5 mana and gets cheaper for every elemental you have in play. So this works perfectly in this deck since we're just flooding the board with a bunch of cheap elementals. Or we can play the Overflow Surger, which fills up your board with 1 card because it's a 4-mana 3/2 that summons a copy of itself for every turn in a row that you've played an elemental. And that also has amazing synergy with the new legendary card Saroon, which gives all elementals in your deck fire spell damage +1. So if you give the Overflow Surger fire spell damage +1, all the copies that it will summon will also have the spell damage, and you can end up doing some huge burst damage with this combo. And to help set up this combo more consistently, we are running the Rayla Sand Sculptor, pretty much just for the reason of being able to run a Paladin card, the Grill Master, which has a death rattle to draw your highest cost card, which is Saroon. Yeah, Elemental Mage was pretty strong before, but now it's on fire steroids. Next up, we have Starship Druid. So the Starship pieces that Druid got are the Shatari Cloakfield, which is a 2-mana 1/3 elusive that makes the first spell you play in each turn cost 1 less, as well as the Starlight Reactor, where as long as this is on the field, your arcane spells cast twice. And we can really take advantage of that with cards like Distress Signal, where you get to summon 2 random 2-cost minions and refresh 2 mana. Or we have the Astral Phaser, which does 2 damage to 2 random enemy minions, or you can make 1 dormant for 2 turns. And we have the new Cosmic Phenomenon, which is a 5-mana spell where you get to summon 3 2/3s with Taunt. If your board is full, you get to give your minions +1/+1. And this card is especially nutty if you can double it up with the Starlight Reactor and the Distress Signal, so you can easily fill up your board and buff them in the same turn. And then we're also running a big new arcane spell too, the Final Frontier, where you get to discover a 10-mana minion from the past and set its mana to 1. And if you can double up this spell, you get some insane value. And then our last new fun card that we're running is the Ulu the Everdrifter, where every turn it's in your hand, it changes between 2 random choose 1 effects. And it doesn't have much synergy in this deck other than it's just a really fun new card. Yeah, this deck looks like it can do some pretty crazy things for very little mana, but I mean, hey, that's Druid's thing, right? I don't know if you guys are ready for this next deck, and that's going to be Kassar Rogue. So this is a combo deck all built around Kassar, which is the new 6-mana spell where you get to shuffle your hand into your deck and then make every card in your deck cost 3 less mana. So it does empty our hand, but we can set up some card draw with the Quick Pick, where whenever we attack, we draw a card, or the Knick-Knack Shack, which is the 3-mana location where you get to draw a card. If you play it this turn, you get to reopen it and draw again. And because after we play Kassar, everything in our deck is basically 0 mana, we can chain together a bunch of 0 mana draw with a bunch of 0 mana damage spells to kill our opponent in a single turn. Our main damaging spells are just going to be the typical damaging ones like Eviscerate or O Manager. And we're also using the new Moonstone Mauler, which shuffles 3 asteroids into our deck. And because we're drawing so much after Kassar, it's easy to draw those 3 asteroids to get a lot more damage in. And we can give all of those asteroids and all of our damaging spells spell damage with the new Ethereal Oracle. And yeah, you can see where I'm going with this, but it's pretty gross. You can basically play your entire deck and kill your opponent as soon as turn 4 or 5 with this deck. Alright, so our 8th deck up is going to be Crewmate Demon Hunter. This one is all focused around the new mechanic Crewmates, where some cards will add these Crewmates to your hand, and they're 4 mana 4/4 minions with random bonus effects. And when you play them, it'll automatically summon every Crewmate next to it in your hand for free. So you can set up some pretty crazy plays. And some of the cards that give you these Crewmates into your hand, we have the Headhunt, which is a 1 mana spell to do 2 damage, and then you get a Crewmate in your hand. We also have Voronoi Recruiter, which is a 2 mana 1/3 that gives you a crewmate to your hand at the end of every turn. We have Emergency Meeting, which is a 2 mana spell to give you 2 crewmates, but also gives you a random demon that costs 3 or less in between them. And then we also have the new legendary for them, Deirdre Rebel Captain, which is a 4 mana 5/4 rush with a battle cry to shuffle 8 of the crewmates into your deck, and also has a death rattle to draw 1. And the cool thing about all of these crewmates is they're also all Draenei, so you can take advantage of a bunch of the Draenei synergy from this expansion too, like the Starlight Wanderer that makes your next Draenei get +2/+1, or the Stranded Spaceman to give your next Draenei +2 health and rush, or the Crimson Commander to buff all the Draenei in your hand before you summon them, or even the Troubled Mechanic that has a spell burst to draw a Draenei from your deck, like the crewmates that you shuffled with Deirdre. So yeah, this is going to be a very aggressive deck that can make some pretty crazy boards as soon as turn 4 or 5, so you got to be on your toes against this deck. Coming down the home stretch now, our next deck up is going to be Tempo Draenei Warrior. So this deck fully takes advantage of all the new Draenei cards that we got this expansion, because we're going to be running a ton of them to take advantage of new cards like the weapon Crystalline Great Mace, where whenever you attack, you give all Draenei in your hand +2 attack, or the Crimson Commander to have a battle cry and death rattle to give all your Draenei in your hand +1/+1. And after we get some huge Draenei in our hand, we can further take advantage of them with the Expedition Sergeant, where the next Draenei that you play attacks immediately, which works amazing with the Stalwart Avenger, which naturally has a ton of attack because it starts off as a 4 mana 7/2 with immune while attacking, and during your opponent's turn, its health and attack flip-flops. So it helps protect itself so you can keep attacking with its high attack on your turn. And then we also have this Stalwart Avenger that when you play your next Draenei, you get its attack for the turn, so you can set up some huge burst damage as well with this. And as we're overwhelming our opponent with a bunch of Draenei on the board, we can play our Exarch Akama, where whenever this attacks, it allows all of our other Draenei to attack again, so it basically gives them all win fury. And we can give our Akama Rush with the Through Felon Flames, or make it attack right away with the Expedition Sergeant. And then we also have Captain's Log, which is a 4 mana spell that draws 2 cards and gets cheaper for every Draenei that you control. And just as a big wombo combo finisher in here, we are using Velen, Leader of the Exiled, where when it dies, gets to repeat the battlecry and death rattle of all of the Draenei you've played this game. Yeah, it's really cool how much Draenei support we got this expansion, and it all works together perfectly in this deck. Our next deck up is going to be a spicy one, and that's going to be Demon Starship Warlock. So the starship pieces that Warlock got is going to be Heart of the Legion, which is a 2 mana 3/2 lifesteal, and Felfire Thrusters, which is a 3 mana 2/3 with spell burst to do with attack damage to 2 random enemy minions. So as we keep pumping up our starship and we get it huge, when we launch it and activate its spell burst, we can kill up to 4 things and heal up to full because we have lifesteal on it. So it's the perfect defensive starship, so we can do our fun demon stuff, like with Abduction Ray, where you get a random demon that costs 2 less, and it's also repeatable this turn, so you can get a lot of random demons from this. And then we also have Relentless Wrathguard, which does 2 damage to a minion. If you kill it, you're going to discover a demon. And Demonic Studies, where you're going to discover a demon, and the next one costs 1 less. We can help play all of these random demons that we're getting a lot easier with the Foreboding Flame, which is the 2 mana 2/3 that makes all of the random demons that you've generated cost 1 less. And after we've played all of our random demons and they've died, we can resurrect them all over again with the new Archimon Legendary card. Oh, and there's also a way that we can get infinite random demons too with the new Kill Jaden, which destroys your deck and replaces it with an infinite portal, where every turn you get a random demon that gets bigger and bigger every turn. So we literally have infinite value with this deck, and we cannot die to fatigue. And because games are going to be going on longer, we can run the new Black Hole card, which gets to destroy all minions except for demons, which is pretty much all of our opponent's minions and none of ours. Yeah, this deck looks to do some really fun stuff. I'm really excited to try this one out. And our last deck up, but not least, is going to be this new Draenei Priest. So this one is going to be an aggressive priest archetype, surprise, surprise, because we have a lot of new tempo cards, like the Overzealous Healer, which is a 1 mana 3/3 with Death Rattle to heal the enemy hero by 6. But if you spell burst it, you get to silence that Death Rattle away. And then we also have the Orbital Halo, which is a 2 mana spell that gives a minion +2/+1 in Divine Shield. And it costs 0 if you played a card next to it in hand this turn. And we're also running the new Anchorite, where whenever one of your minions is overhealed, it it permanently gains that much more health. And we have some really good friendly healing to take advantage of this on all of our minions, like with Fan Club or Funnel Cake or the Dreamboat. So we can end up making all of our minions pretty chonky and hard to remove. And then we have all the other typical Draenei synergy cards, like the Starlight Wanderer that makes your next Draenei get +2/+1, or the Stranded Spaceman that gives your next Draenei +2 health and rush, or the Crimson Commander that buffs the Draenei in your hand. And we also have another really cool Priest Draenei card, and that's Ascara. It has a battle cry that your next Draenei played summons a copy of itself. And of course, for a big wombo combo finisher in any kind of Draenei deck, we are using Velen to repeat the battle cry and death rattle of all the Draenei that we've played. Yeah, the Draenei works surprisingly well in Priest, and it'll be nice to finally play a Tempo Priest again. Well, that about wraps up all the decks that I prepared for you that are ready to go for day 1 of the new expansion. And I did put together all of these decks myself. So if you enjoyed them or got some new ideas, then let me know by leaving a like down below. And also let me know down below in the comments section, which deck are you most looking forward to playing for the new expansion? But I'll see you guys in the great dark beyond.